Hey photo friend, Phil here with a new editing challenge. Each month we post a photo that you can take part in and edit yourself. All the links for the photo file will be down below in the description of this video, or you can download it in the resources if you're watching this video in a course. This should be a super fun one to edit. It's a cool kind of car photo we got from wesaturate.com. And as always, the best part about this whole series is that you can see what other students and photographers like you thought of this photo and how they edited it over in the Photography and Friends Facebook group. So find the thread for, wow, tongue twisters. Find the thread for this post by searching for #editingchallenge, or just go to the announcements of the group page if you're watching it in this month, February 2020. Awesome, thanks so much, and I'm gonna jump into Lightroom and edit it myself. All right, let's see what we can do with this photo, this car shot, and I got this again from wesaturate.com. Great site for finding photos to practice with. This is from Main Cloud. Not sure if that's your name or what, but let's see what we can do with this, because I think we can make it a lot more creative. One thing I could tell, I think this car is not moving, and so it's just stopped there. And so we'll try to add some sort of, I don't know, style or something to it to make it look like there's some motion, which I think, well, we'll see what we can do in Lightroom. You can do a lot of cool stuff in Photoshop with that. First things first, we're just going to go through my process. As always, I'm looking at these photos for the very first time. I love the 16:9 aspect ratio. I just find it a natural aspect ratio myself. I think I'm going to crop it in this way, kind of put it on the rule of thirds. Not only does that help get rid of this guy back here, although I might go like this just a little bit. The car's kind of centered, but weighted to the third. I do want to get rid of that guy in the background. I'll use the healing brush tool to do that. We're putting this horizon at the top line. Although we can maybe, actually no, I'm going to bump it down just a little bit. We're going to play around with our sky and see what we can do with the sky. So we kind of got a little bit back here still of the sky. So I'm going to take my healing brush tool right here, and we can just literally just click and drag over the sky, and then we can move this around. That seems to work. You want to pick a spot that is kind of similar to what you're trying to remove. And if you're new to Lightroom and you're kind of like confused, you're like, oh, whoa, what are you doing, Phil? Definitely check out our full Lightroom courses. Something like that looks pretty good. All right, so that looks pretty good for removing. No one's going to question that. You could always, in Lightroom, go press the backslash button to see the before and after. Pretty clean, right? The next thing I do is just play with my tone, my exposure overall. Everything's pretty good. The sky is a little bright and you don't have that much information in it. I do want to boost the brightness of this car. So let's just bring up our shadows just a little bit. I kind of want to make everything a little bit brighter, maybe boost our overall exposure, but really bring down our highlights and our whites. We'll do even more with just the sky, like I said. Shadows, bring up, again, backslash. I just like using that to see. And you get some of the more details in this grille that were lost and other parts of the car that were lost before. This is also a stylized photo where a style like adding clarity kind of adds this HDR effect. You could also go the other way and kind of give this glow effect. I might play around with that a little bit later. I'm going to just add a little bit of clarity for now. Dehaze is definitely something I want to do, but just for the sky. I don't want to do this for the rest of the photo, although again, that's a style that you could go for. It's not, the dehaze button is not for giving a style. It's for bringing information and detail out, literally dehazing, and it works good for things like clouds and skies, but you can use it for style if you like that. I do want to boost the overall saturation of this photo Sometimes I'll use just the vibrance, which is good for this photo too, because it brings up the saturation of just the reds and blues more so than the yellows and oranges that you see here in the sort of dirt patch behind this car. I'm going to reserve the tone curve for later on to just add some contrast if I want. With the HSL panel, I'm going to go ahead with my color picker, go into this red and just boost the saturation. I might even go into the luminance and boost the saturation of the red just a little bit. So see, this is very specific in the sense that we're just boosting the brightness, the exposure of that specific red. Now, if I go here in this blue, I'm not going to do that. Let's see what happens if I just go into the sky. Again, it's going to probably pick the blue, which I don't necessarily want too much because it brings down the window, although having a dark window is kind of cool, so that helps a little bit. Split toning is definitely a stylized thing that I might add later on, just to give this photo a sort of more of an effect or a style. And then let's just see, there's not too much noise. Might just add a little bit of noise reduction though, just smooth out some of those details. And we'll see if this has any, I like removing chromatic aberrations. Sometimes you can't tell, but if you zoom in here really far, sometimes along the edges of things, you get these sort of magenta lines. You can see it here, and that's not a natural thing. That's just an issue with the lens and the sharpness and the edges of things. I'm noticing a little bit of green line there. I'm not sure if this is okay. You can see this was shot on a Nikon, so it will automatically unwarp your photo. So I like doing that unless you like the natural look of your lens. Now I kind of did like the natural vignetting. I don't want the warp, but the vignetting is fine. So I might bring down the vignetting just a little bit to bring back some of that. The natural vignetting from the camera, that is, and the lens. All right, this is looking pretty good. Okay, so now let's go in and fix some problem areas. So first I'm going to use our graduated filter up here. We're going to reset it by double clicking effect, click and drag down over the horizon. Pressing O, you can see what was selected, or click this show select mask overlay. And it's pretty much getting the sky. I'm just going to go ahead and edit as is. I could brush out or erase the selection where these buildings are, but I don't know if anything I'm going to do with this graduated filter will really be a problem. So I am going to add some dehaze, like so. And I'm also going to drop our, drop our sharpness. I think having sort of a shallower depth of field kind of style will make this photo look better. So dehazing actually adds more detail to things. And as I do that, I can see in the buildings right here that it does start to get a little bit too grungy. It looks like you're painting over it. So I am going to brush that out. So with the graduated filter, I'm going to click brush, erase. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And I am going to turn on auto mask, which will help because Lightroom will detect the edges as I am going near them and should basically follow the edges of the building. So you can see that does a pretty good job. So now what this filter is doing is not going to be applied to the buildings. I think I'm just going to go over this. Although, I guess one issue, and I definitely don't want it affecting the car, so I'm just going to make sure we're erasing this car right here. Although, I guess what we're seeing here, though, is now that the blur that I added isn't going to be affecting the buildings at all. So, this is a question. Is that the style we want? Because there's other ways that we can get around this. All right, so now the sky is kind of blurred. Oops, pressing V. If you press V, it toggles black and white. So just in case you press V and you're like, what? Sometimes I press V because I'm trying to get back to my cursor, which in Photoshop is the V button. So if we go before and after, you can already see that a lot is happening. Let's just click done. Before, after, before, after. I think with a brush, I'm just going to add a little bit more blur to like the background, the buildings, and it will give us a little bit more control. So let's drop our sharpness all the way. You could always bring back the sharpness or not blur as much if you don't want. So I'm just going to brush over here, and I actually don't want auto mask on. And I think this is fine because it's actually going to double up on the sky, double up the blur on the sky because we have the graduated filter that we just added before. And you got to think about it like kind of naturally, what is going to be out of focus. So say the focus plane was perfectly on this car, then some spots up here of the road are going to be a little out of focus. This is definitely a stylistic thing though, guys. Girls, whoever's watching this is a stylistic thing. It's not something that I would recommend for all photos at all. But I think a photo like this where we're trying to, really get our attention on the car itself, it could look kind of cool. It's kind of that tilt shift look. Okay, so I've kind of gone crazy with this, and I'm just going to go over here like so. And if I press the O, you'll see I've basically colored everything. I think I even got the car. So I'm going to take my eraser, turn off auto mask, make it super big, and I'm just going to brush across kind of a straight thing across like this. Just clean that back up. And that's the cool thing about Lightroom is we can undo things. Because I don't want it to look completely unnatural. I felt like that looked like that effect you add on Instagram or whatever, just a super crazy blur. Not a huge fan of that. And not that I'm going for a natural look, but I think I don't like going completely unnatural either. So that's looking pretty good, I think. Another way we could sort of direct the viewer's eye to the car, which is ultimately your goal as a photographer, is to help direct the viewer to whatever your subject is we can create sort of more of a natural vignette around this car. So I used our radial filter. I'm going to rotate it around our car. We're selecting everything outside of the car, okay? Maybe even move this down just a little bit. And now we can just take our exposure and drop it down. So when we do this, you can see that it actually makes our car pop a little bit more. You could also do the opposite. Either way, it kind of helps focus the attention on the car. That's looking pretty good. All right, so now we're back on our basic settings. We're not in our adjustment filters. So I might go in here, boost our clarity just a little bit, give that more of a style. And then I'm going to go into split toning. So what split toning allows us to do is adjust and add color or a tone or a hue, a different hue to the different tones, the highlights or the shadows. So you can just use these sliders, or you can click this button next to highlights. And basically with an eyedropper, you go up and I'm clicking and dragging around. Now you might say this looks a little bit wonky. It looks a little bit overdone. And I would agree. But when we go back to our shadows and do the same, it'll start to blend a little bit more. Now I'm just going and kind of seeing, okay, what style am I going for? I'm almost thinking like kind of a cool magenta might look cool. We'll start there. Now this is pretty creative edit. But now I'm going to go in my shadows and do the same. And you can see as I drag across, it gives kind of this nice, or I don't know, some people might not think this is nice, but it gives it definitely that kind of stylistic look, like a filter or a different film stock. Because when you got different film stocks, when you were shooting actually on film, you got these different kind of looks. Now that I'm doing this, I think maybe the shadows should be more of the magenta, and we can go for like a desert vibe. And there's different color palettes that work. You know, the teals and purples. You got that sort of Miami style. You can go for more of like a sepia tone. And so I'm not really worrying about how bright this is right now. I think I'm going to go more with yellow. This is kind of the split tone that I err on the side of. A yellow to the highlights, a blue to the shadows. But I'm not worrying about how it necessarily looks right now, because what we can do once we have the right color is increase or decrease the saturation. You can do that by moving this up and down in this color picker. You can drag this slider to the left or right. Or you can drag these sliders here. It's basically doing the same thing. So you can drag these sliders down, and you can also have this balance, which will make the shadow split tone more powerful, or the highlight. So if I go all the way to the highlights, then it's adding that yellow. And I actually kind of like that yellow now that I'm seeing that. You can also adjust the hue here, which is just the color itself. I kind of like that. Oh yeah, that's kind of cool. See, this is the first time that I'm looking at this photo, and this is what I do. I play around with a photo and see what I like. Adding that yellow is actually pretty cool. It makes that sort of golden look. And then usually what I do is I walk away, I look away, and then I come back and say, oh, wow, that looks crazy. I'll turn this on and off here. You can see it's actually not that big of an edit compared to where I started. Remember just a minute ago when I had like the magenta like crazy like this? Where I ended up was much more natural. Just a subtle filter. And that's my style. Of course, you could go crazy with it, but that's my personal style. Lastly, I'm going to play with the tone curve. Just add a little bit more contrast, especially for this photo of a car, making it pop just even more. And let's go back down to saturation. Let's just bring up the saturation of the red. Blue, always a nice sort of balance between red and blue. It's nice to have in your photo. Now I noticed that some of this blur doesn't look that good because the tree up here at the very top is kind of blurred, but then the rest of the tree isn't. So I'm gonna go back into our brush. Where is that brush? If you click on the brush, you should be able to see the little dot where you started. Okay, sometimes it's lost. Here it was. So if I press O, you can probably see that the top of this tree is blurred. So let's go ahead and we're going to erase, and we are actually going to leave auto mask on. Oops, we want the erase, not the blur. So we will see what we can do with Lightroom in terms of blurring out everything behind the tree, but not the tree itself. And again, this is something that would probably be done in Photoshop. Just going over the edge, and now with auto mask, it does a little bit better job not picking up the car here. Pressing O. Ugh, I'm not really liking that sort of look right here with the tree. It just doesn't look natural. What would happen if I just blur everything out behind there? that might just look better. I mean, the style. I mean, I could spend another, couple hours doing this. Maybe not hours, but another 15 minutes, really fine tuning it. But again, probably something better to do in Photoshop. Yeah, I could keep playing with it, but I think that looks pretty good. The sky right now, just looking, when I'm going back and forth, I start to see things. The sky, I think, is a little bit oversaturated and just looks a little bit off just with all the dehazing, the saturation increases, all that kind of stuff. So I just undid the HSL saturation for blue. So I think that looks a little bit better. Now the sky does look a little bit maybe too dark, too grungy. So I'm going to take our graduated filter, bring back some of that dehaze. Sharpness we'll bring up just a little bit. You'll see and you'll notice as you watch a lot of my edits, I go back and forth about things, but at the end of the day, I often err on the side of not having things look too unnatural. Now the top of this car is a little bit blurry now. I want to make sure the top of that car. Woo, Phil, what are you doing? Here we are on this brush stroke. Erase. Let's go to the top of the car. We don't want that blurred at all. Same with the back. I mean, you might want the back just a little bit blurred, but anyways, as I say, I could keep going and going and going, but I think this looks pretty good. Let's see the before and after. Before, after, before, after. Definitely some style to it. And let's see side-by-side view. I don't know. What do you think? I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough, and I can't wait to see what you do with your edits. Make sure you post them to the Facebook group, Photography and Friends. And as always, you can join that group if you are enrolled in any of our courses related to photography. Instructions for getting in the group are at the beginning of the course. Awesome. Thanks so much for watching, and I can't wait to see your photos. Have a beautiful day.